Jr. Today we have the Friday webinar to talk about the annual plan. So as usual, just use the chat feature if you have questions during the presentation. We'll answer those as we. Let's take a look at the agenda. Today we'll talk about the annual basics and the framework, where to access the annual plan, how to complete and submit the annual plan, understanding the general assurances, using the fact sheet, fiscal system, as well as any questions. So annual plan basics. The template was released last month. We're on revision 3. So if you go on the website and click on the What's New, pull up that template, you'll notice at the last page of the template, it will show what version you're on, what changes were made for each of the divisions. So we're up to Division 3, and last done 12/17. So you still have a few months to complete the annual plan on August 15th. Must be submitted through the portal, so you must have access to the portal. And the consortium lead submits it and certifies that all members have participated in the process. So if you don't have access to the portal, then you would have to Greg Hill to that portal. If your consortia lead is in the midst of changing, retiring, placing that lead, you'd have to get access and lead. And so the plan this year is a little more big picture, narrative responses to questions. There's tables, but none of the details like we had in past years with objectives, activities, and other things like that will be due. We're going to have a fiscal system redesign that will be due in the fall, and we're working on them out. It's still in development phase. We'll talk a little bit about that. But the new fiscal system will have more member-based activities and work plan and budget and expenses, whereas now those are at the consortia level, member-based activities. You have one question. Janet asked, are the fact sheets available yet? And yes, they are. But we did have to pull them back. We're revising them because some of the numbers, so we're hoping that those fact sheets will be available next week. So look for that maybe by, I would say, give it till about the 4th of July, and we'll have posted, revised and reposted. All right, so the annual plan framework, basically it's based on the law, the AB 104 legislation, and in the law there's a requirement for a 3-year plan, that long-term vision, and requirements for that long-term vision. You should already have a 3-year plan. You might have amended it to reflect newer information, new data, but that plan is good through 17-18, so good through the program year. And then each year you're required to develop an annual plan based on the 3-year plan, based on the legislation, to come up with strategies for the coming year. So this fiscal system that I was talking about in the prior slide will develop those details by. So the consortium comes up with strategies for the upcoming year, and then the members in the fall, probably like October, November, will come into the fiscal system, put in their budget from the CFAD, strategies from the plan will already be there, so they'll just checkbox things, say what activities they'll be doing based on those strategies. Periodically, quarter, they'll be hopefully that framework is understandable. Somebody asked about the PowerPoint. There is a PowerPoint posted right there in the box to the right. Moving on. So annual plan access template is on the website, like I said, along with general assurances, the fact sheets, revising. Consortia leads must access the portal via the website to complete the plan. You'll need a password to get in the portal. The portal is limited to 2 access points per consortia, so usually people that have access to the portal. And just to clarify, the portal, the AEBG portal, is not the financial separate system database. It's referred to as the Career Technical 70 office. So that's not the. So here's a kind of what you'll see when you log on to the portal. It'll say click portal log on. You can get there from the front page of the AEBG website, where you can click on this link here, except there's one, so it should be so aebg.o/.edu, and then you would log on with your email, put your password, remember your password. You would got user, you would have to get Greg Hill to limit it to 2 users to the right. Story. So Lucy's saying, will there be more revisions? Challenging to prepare the plan and then to keep doing it. We don't anticipate any, although we've had 3. Hopefully that's the last one. There are no pending revisions, so good news. Make sure when you go in the portal, going through the website, .edu portal. So when you submit your plan, you'll have to go to through the portal, and once you get in the portal, you'll have to do submit your reports on the page that click the link for Consortium Annual Plan. So first, the drop-down menu for reports. Click on Submit Reports. You get to submit your reports. You would click on the so you open that up. Not sure if there's a time limit of how long you can open it up. Saves it, but I would make sure you save it when you leave. Have technical questions about. All right, so here's how the annual plan looks. So, and we'll get into this. We have shots and so the first section is an executive summary, plans and goals. Next section is on effectiveness and meeting. Then we get into seamless transition, student acceleration, development, leveraging resources, and finally, again, there's this fiscal management, how you. Then we have general assurances that you're supposed to certify that all members where in the consortia of the general assurances at the consortia level and general assurances at. So we do have screenshots, but they are kind of small, so we would encourage you to print out the annual plan website. So the first section, and we'll show you what it looks like So first page of the annual plan would look like this. And one is goals. So that first question there to 5 is providing an executive summary of your consortium's implementation plan for 17-18. In your summary, please include a narrative justifying how the planned allocations are consistent with 3-year adult ed plan, a clear, concise description, versus vision, accomplishments prior year, primary goals for the upcoming year. So basically, this is kind of looking forward, looking back, quick 500-word summary. We will use these summaries in reports. Stakeholders come on to you. They might go to these summaries to get an idea of what you're doing. So please, summaries like you're talking to the legislature or a stakeholder in your community of how you're doing and going, what your 3-year plan's vision is, working on that. So all these kind of encapsulates that executive. That then we get into the detail part. So meeting the needs. So this was a little difficult. We had to make some revisions here. Because we did want to look backwards and see what you had accomplished as well as looking forward. So the 2 questions here are, what are the primary gaps in, how are you meeting the adult ed needs, identifying the please provide the reason for the gaps, services current. We ask a follow-up question, 17-18 strategies are incrementally increase capacity to identify gap areas or help. So you must list one. I think we have strategies. These are real big picture strategies. Let's take a look at that screenshot. So for the first question related to what are the primary gaps and needs, adult ed needs. So there is a table that you're supposed to complete, and I think these might be self-populated from the prior year. I mean, I'll refer to Greg on that one. But they'll list the top 5 strategies that gaps in service. Then you will go in and how did you know? What resources did you use to identify these gaps? So did you survey? Did you data? Students or stakeholders? And then the other question that will have, how will you measure effectiveness of towards meeting? To include any local indicators plan. If you're looking at any other metrics other than the state. Question relates to 17-18. What are the strategies? And or help maintain. So going back to the AB 86 objective, I believe it was objective number 4, talked about maintenance effort service levels, which are different than identifying gap areas. So you can explain that. So if you're focused on maintaining service levels, because those service levels were cut in the past, and or if you've also looked at identifying gaps and to increase capacity in those, or you could have a gap. Offered in 06, 07 versus ability, still aren't at that. So a lot of different ways you could go. you'll have a lot of fun figuring that. I encourage you to inform us on that and use this as a tool forward on the majority of the funding. Is really like to see. Let's move on to the related to annual plan seamless transition. So looking at the graph here, it's kind of a little different chart than the prior section. So seamless transitions, it says explain how consortium members and partners integrating existing programs and services, creating seamless post-secondary education. Please also identify key faced and overcome during the 16-17 program year, your efforts to. So I think Lucy question, if it's an ongoing project, how should we? So if you look at these questions, so the first section of this chart is in 16-17, what strategies were planned? So that would be pre-populated. To what extent have these strategies been implemented? So we kind of have a rating. So if these are ongoing, you would be rating on how you did this past year, 17. How well did you do to accomplish what you set out for here? Even if this is an ongoing project or ongoing strategy, we know that some of these things program you'll always be focused on particular strategy because it's launching or the so I would when you look at extent of the strategies been implemented, just rate it on what you've done in the even if it's ongoing. So if you accomplish what you thought you did for this year, then you would list, fully implement. And then what challenges prevented full implementation? State an idea. Here's your. And then what intervention strategies, if any, are implement or expand on this? So when Lucy asked the question, an ongoing project, the column as well to put. Then last column, if you have state support, what would be most helpful to fully implement? So if there's something that we're not rolling out that you haven't heard about, I would list that in that section so it gives the state an idea, and it also gives you an idea of what things that you figure out what's happening. Okay, so let's see if we have any other questions. So Greg, we have a quick question for you from Marianne. It says, Greg, you mentioned that some of the cells are pre-populated for our consortium.
Yep.
Would we see that if we log into the portal?
Yes.
I mean, so what are people going to see when they log into the portal?
So when they log into the portal, what they should see, once they navigate to the annual plan and say, create a new annual plan, what they should see in those tables, they should be pre-populated with the activities that were submitted as part of your annual plan last year. Each one should be enumerated in a row, and then you have the opportunity and the requirement really to respond to each of the activities you have planned. Following that, you would then provide strategies that you intend to implement in the coming year, and all of those are, and you're going to encounter that same structure, right, for each of these objectives.
Okay. I think Marianne's following up with the question. Okay, so she's good. So let's move along to student acceleration. So it's the same approach that Greg was just referring to. you'll have the first approach, which will be filling out kind of the looking backward at 16, 17, and looking forward at strategies for 17, 18. So those are the two questions. But we also have some more information on there as far as specific, evidence-based strategies across regions, accelerated student progress. Common strategies include, and we say compressing courses into shorter or intense terms, individual instruction based on student competencies. So we give, and then we talk about putting skills, content into the context of student goals and career pathways. So we give a couple of examples, but those aren't all the examples that you could be working on for student acceleration. Greg, any comments on that?
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm glad that you pointed that out too, Neil. There is more information, more guidance in the document itself, and so we encourage you to, read it carefully. I think too, one of the questions that kept coming up is, folks, for example, wanted more, what is the relationship between the table and the area where folks are listing the new strategies, and can we add more lines? And the answer is, to the first question is, right, the table is meant to be backwards looking, with an eye for, evaluating your progress, thinking about, the level of granularity with which you planned previously, and helping to inform ultimately how you're going to plan moving forward. If you find, for example, you're struggling with figuring out how well, to what extent have we implemented this? More than likely, what that means is the strategy really wasn't well defined, or at least the edges of it weren't defined well enough. And it's a challenge planning across agencies, and there's no judgment there. But when working across agencies, what you want to try to do is establish high-level goals first, right, that reflect that change, right? What do we want to see different in 3 or 5 years? Not just what are we going to do, but what's going to change? And how are we going to be the force of that change? What do we need to do in order to realize that? And then you backwards map. And through the process of progressive elaboration, which is, the breaking down into pieces, that's how you're going to incrementally start to, see the changes that you want to see. We don't need at this level every single thing that you intend to do as a consortium or a set of agencies. We don't need 20 lists, 20 activities by each consortium and who's doing it and all that, because it's just too much detail. And but what we are looking for is a coherent, cohesive, expression of how it is the consortium intends to work together as a set of agencies to achieve goals that that you are telling the state are indeed, the key goals for you, and which meet the requirements of AB 104 and the educational, and training needs of the population you serve. And so, just to wrap this up really quickly, it's the what we want to see in those last 5. Once you get done with that at the table, what do you want to see? How are you going to work together to do it? And think in terms of the end goal. What are your outcomes going to look like? And if you need help with that, that's what the TAP folks are here to do. So do reach out.
Right. And I think it was just a few weeks ago we did do a webinar on accelerated student acceleration. It was North San Diego. I think it was Kathleen Porter and forget her first name, Sebring, from Palomar College. Mm-hmm. So if Veronica or somebody from SCOE or AEBG TAP can put a reminder in the chat box, if people want to go back and look at that webinar, how would they be able to do that? Because that was a real good webinar on student acceleration. So in fact, the next one, annual plan shared professional development, I think in 2 weeks we're going to have a webinar from AIR on shared professional development. So, and we're hoping to do one as well as on leveraging resources and student transitions as well. So these webinars can give you ideas as far as strategies, look at best practices. So when that plan gets submitted August 15th, you'll have these big picture strategies that you want to do. And then later on we'll talk about the fiscal part, but when your members in October, November enter in the details like Greg was talking about, we're not going to be looking for 20 or 30 details. We're going to try to make it simple where the members will fall under these big picture strategies and kind of check boxes for the activities that they're going to be doing, and we'll provide a drop down of standard type activities that belong to strategies in these areas. So we're going to try to simplify this as well. Oh, thank you, Veronica. So if you need to look at that webinar on student acceleration, check the chat. Veronica's put some information in there. Greg, anything on shared professional development to add to that?
No, not at all. I think just read the, everyone who just, pay attention to some of the language there. It'll provide, I think, enough context for what the prompt is after.
Yeah, we do throw you a little bit of a, a curveball here on leveraging resources, the last part of the first section, because we asked you to go to your consortium fact sheet. It says, see the attached adult education fiscal resource table on your consortium fact sheet. So we had those out, we pulled them back, but they'll be posted by this, Greg, this weekend possibly, or next week?
Absolutely.
Early next week?
Yeah, no, actually we were going to try to post today, and pending how people, well, we'll see. We'll see what happens after the webinar. Folks get really confused about this, leveraging resources one. I cannot, I'll hazard this without saying that this is gospel truth, but to my mind, this means two things, right? To what extent are you making the best use of resources that aren't necessarily, that aren't AEBG directly funded, and that could include with consortium partners or members. So, for example, placing, an adult ed course at the community college, or providing support services through one agency in order to support another. But it could also, and I think this is probably the most sort of fecund way of thinking about it, it also, I think, really means in what ways are you making use of regional resources? All those other agencies that are out there that aren't necessarily big enough, to be members within the consortium, but do provide services and with whom you work on the regular. And so,
right.
Yeah.
And Greg, just to add in, on the table right now with the policy teams is because our student data systems can't track by fund source. We're looking at tracking by program area regardless of fund source. So Good. This kind of feeds into the whole leveraging and braiding, because we can't really say, oh, this student who was funded by WIOA and AEBG and non-credit, we need you to separate all that out. And that's impossible. So we're willing to just say, okay, here is the program area. Here is how we define it. We don't care how it's funded, but we want to know what happens to that student. So that kind of goes back to what Greg's talking about with the leveraging resources. And if we go in that policy, with that policy recommendation, it'll make it much easier for you guys not to worry about how you're braiding and leverage, but encouraging that leveraging and braiding. Greg, anything to add there?
Other than, and I will say for the record, I'm very much behind that approach. But, yeah, yes. I'm probably going to get in trouble now, but no, I think that's probably it. There is a question from Lucy. She said, I see the formats for new activities in each category. We've been focusing on refining and expanding our existing project activities so we can get traction and keep making improvements. Can we put items there that we're expanding or only things that are brand new? No, that's perfect, Lucy. Actually, I would encourage folks to copy and paste what Lucy's written here and save it, right? Because the question she's asking is actually getting at the heart of why the annual plan template is structured the way it is. So some strategies, are going to extend either, over time or imply further refinement. And so in your case, Lucy, what you're, with what you have here, what I would say is, you've got your strategy is articulated, in 1516. And in those other boxes, okay, what were some of the challenges? Okay, these were the challenges we faced. Are you planning to implement it? Are you planning to extend it? And that's where you can say, yeah, absolutely, this is what we're intending to do, or we're going to seek to refine it. And then in the actual, where it lists out the area for the strategies, that's where you can actually articulate, well, what is the next step, right? And really try to express it at a more concrete, more granular level. This also keeps the, even though it's sort of, let's say it's one big strategy, by forcing that kind of thinking and forcing that kind of, reporting, it keeps the information fresh. And it also, I think, becomes more useful for you as a mechanism for tracking and evaluating your own progress. So brand new, no. It doesn't have to be brand spanking new, like it's totally never done anything like it before. If it's an extension or a refinement, yes, that's precisely how you would, yes, that's a perfectly acceptable and indeed very much supported approach, right, to itemizing those high-level activities.
All right, great. Thanks, Greg. So we're going to move on to Section 2, Fiscal Management, and that kind of looks like this. It's just a box with your total funding for 15-16, your total spent, your total funds remaining, and then another line for 16-17. We're trying to make this very simple because the questions, going back to the questions, please provide an update on your AEBG fiscal spending. In the table below, identify total MOE and non-MOE funding spent or encumbered for 15-16 and 16-17. Of course, 15-16, you do have the split of MOE and non-MOE. In 16-17, it's all consortia funding. But we need to get an idea of how much money is really being left on the table as we get to the end of 15-16, how much is still available in 16-17, because our fiscal systems, we're not having the ability to really track that MOE as finitely as we have. So for those of you at the consortia level, you will have to ask your K-12 and county offices that received MOE in 15-16, ask them how much money is remaining, because that wouldn't show up in the consortia reporting system. It will show up in the CDE school accounting system, but sometimes those reports are run a little bit after the fact. So the next question then is identifying any challenges related to spending or encumbering funds, and then please describe your approach to incorporating the remaining funds from 15-16 and 16-17 into your plans for 17-18. And so, like we said at the beginning, these annual plans are going to cover 3 years worth of funding, because you'll be closing out 15-16, you'll be in the middle of 16-17, and you'll be rolling or just getting the 17-18 funding. So, Greg, anything to add on this particular section?
Not really, other than to say that, MOE, we may want to just define that quickly. just for new folks. MOE stands for Maintenance of Effort funding, and that's the funding that was released directly to agencies at the outset of the AB 104 period. If you're new to that term or unfamiliar with that term, ask around a little bit and you'll get some more information about it, I'm sure. But anyway, yeah, that's it.
Okay. So hopefully that's clear. I mean, that might take you some time to track down the members and for them to track down their accounting people and say, well, how much do I have of 15, 16 MOE, or give your consortium how much you have of the consortia funds for 15, 16. I mean, hopefully you're keeping tabs on this on a quarterly basis and not waiting for the every 6 month reporting process at the state level. Okay, so seeing no questions, we'll move along to general assurances, which is very interesting because if you print this out, this is the first stab at defining kind of consortia effectiveness, member effectiveness. And the reason that's critical is people are always wondering, how do I know my member's doing all right? How do I, use that legislative language that allows me to reduce my members' funds if they're not effective? So this general assurances is kind of the first stab, and I think we used it last year as well, is defining what, at a minimum, what's expected at the consortium level, what's expected at the member level, and you can use this to craft your bylaws and your governance plan on what you're holding members accountable to. And we do that at the state, and we hold the consortium accountable. So if for some reason your member's not participating per the legislation, or they can't offer the programs, then you might have some recourse to move that money around. But you have to follow some of the intervention strategies and try to work with that member in a public setting, to make sure this is all above board. So that's why we're listing those general assurances. This is the first step. I'm sure. We have a little interference there, but that's okay. In the future, we'll be probably tying possible metrics to this, or looking at consortia-defined metrics. I mean, that's something we're talking about, is looking at a menu of metrics at the consortia level to say, okay, at the state level, we're tracking the big 6 metrics, right? Get a job, keep a job, high school diploma, high school equivalency, completion of degrees, certificates, training program, literacy skill gains, and post-secondary transition. So that's going to be done automatic. But at the local level, with your annual plans and your 3-year plan and your target populations and your priorities in the region, what metrics make sense to monitor member progress, student progress, regional effectiveness, member effectiveness? So these things will evolve over time, and I think that's the next phase we're going to go into. As we get our data systems and our policy and things like this worked out, then we're going to be able to hone in on the data, look at the metrics, allow you to evaluate your member effectiveness while we're looking at the big picture, cross-cutting common measures. You'll be looking at those regional metrics based on your plan, your target population, and your regional priorities. Anything to add on that, Craig?
No, not at all. I think you covered it well.
Okay. All right. So with about 12 minutes left, we're going to get into the fact sheets. So Greg, and then we have the fiscal system. So Greg, unfortunately, I'll give you like 6 minutes to talk about the fact sheet.
Okay. So some of you have seen some early versions of the fact sheets. Others may not have. I'm going to try to do a quick screen share to see, just to provide a little bit of context for what I'm talking about. Just bear with me. I'm eating up my 6 minutes, but okay. Hopefully you'll see it here shortly. Nope, it could not open it. Okay, so that's fine. All right. Fact sheets are basically, we created one-page fact sheets that are not dissimilar from the ones that you may remember from AB 86 planning period. The difference is, we wanted to try to follow that same example as folks found it pretty useful, but we saw an opportunity to expand them a little bit and see if we couldn't provide a little bit, a little bit more information to help with planning. I'm really wanting to share this, but it's just not working.
So Greg, I have a couple of screenshots of like a sample fact sheet on the next few slides if you want to use those.
Oh, okay. Made a couple changes. Yeah, and for some weird reason, I don't know if that's working or not, but at any rate, we tried to, it's organized around three big sections, right? What are your demographics? How much funding is available? And then how are consortium meeting regional needs? I want to be really, I want you, I'm trying to put this. The information we're providing really is meant to help with your planning. And in that way, we do hope that it's useful. What we don't want you to sort of think is that these are, end all be all of, what's out there to tell you with regard to what, regional needs are. In fact, there are really a number of really great resources just on the Chancellor's Office website alone that can tell you what some of the needs are at the super regional level. But at any rate, we'll be providing them today or this weekend, depending on how folks respond, following the webinar. But for those of you who have seen them and, prompted some questions, there are some key questions that kept coming up, and so I'm going to try to address those now, but then also let you know that the fact sheets, once we repost, will have all sorts of caveats that'll help you, better contextualize the information. Some of them are here. So the demographic information is from, ESRI and as well as ACS, American Community Survey. It's the data that was used to determine funding. And so in some ways it maps really nicely to, an assessment of regional needs. In others it doesn't. And so you'll want to take it, take that with a grain of salt. One of the areas that we were able to expand on was the, kind of the impact that as expressed in students served. We didn't have that in the AB 86 sheets, or we had some of it, but because we did a fair bit of data collection 15, 16, and because of the relationships that have been developed with other state agencies, we're able to augment some of that data. And so, we took what was reported and during AB 86 and also we're able to extract data from, MIS for the community colleges, so that we can compare apples to apples over the last, the last 4 years. And
2-minute warning, Greg. 2-minute warning.
2-minute warning. Okay. And so there's that. There's no doubt you'll have questions about how we calculated funding. And yeah, we'll be glad to field them. They're estimates based on the information that we have. So yeah, it's just, just meant to be helpful. Do reach out. Oh, thank you. Good. We've made some changes since this. Thank you. Perfect. But this is basically, how it would work. Where we got the demographics up there, and then funding, and then yeah, and then oops, back one. Impact and so forth, percent of needs met, et cetera, and their little arrows. It's really just for 15, 16, and some of the percentages are different now, just because. Yeah. Yeah. John's saying, well, that's in part why we pulled them. But, you know, the kind of the funding that's available is going to be based on a few factors. And right now, folks have expressed concern in particular around the, what is it? The amount of funding for CCD apportionment, and then there was a formula error on actually in particular yours, John. So it's fair to be suspect, but so that's why we pulled them in part. Folks were also asking about being able to show the state overall. And so in the next version, we'll show, you know, how many students are served, you know, in each program area in 15, 16, you know, in the state. And this data is unduplicated, right? Which is different than, for example, you know, what we were able to report previously. And so it's really a much, you know, a much more, I want to say accurate. It's just a much more granular look at you know, the populations that are being served. Anyway, I'm sure I've eaten up my 2 minutes, but please do email or text if, you know, if you've seen them, and better yet, if there are features that you'd really like to be able to see, email us now, and we'll do it today, basically. But anyway, yeah, and thank you, John. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so just to wrap up, the last few slides are on the new fiscal system. It'll be coming out this fall. It'll cover 16, 17, and 17, 18 program years, so we'll migrate over there. 15, 16 will stay in the old Chancellor's Office online system, and you will close that out. The new system is member-based. Each member will have a budget. They'll track their own expenses. They'll tell us about the activities they're doing based on the annual plan. Big picture strategies. Like I said, it'll be a drop-down menu for activities, a lot easier to use, more standardized. We can roll it up. So here's a little infographic. On one hand, the state, you have the legislation, you have the governor's budget, we do the preliminary allocations, we do the planning guidance and direction, and then all the consortia activities and member activities will be in this new AEBG database. So that'll include the CFAT, it'll include your fiscal agent or direct funding status, it'll include your 3-year plan, it'll include your governance plan, your bylaws, your annual plans, your performance, your fiscal analytics, your budget approvals. Budget revisions will be done at the consortia level, not at the state level. We'll allow consortia directors more control over their fiscal planning. Members will have to do their own budget. They'll work on their own work plan activities. They'll also report their expenses by object code. And then these programs will be based on work plan activities. We'll also bring in performance. So a lot of good things and more to follow on this, but I wanted to give you just a quick preview of what's coming down the pike. Of course, the benefits are accountable to the member level. Members are using object code, which they haven't used before. It's always been at the consortia level, where you'll be able to list your activities at the member level. We can bring in student data, we can do analytics, and we can standardize stuff. So that gives us a lot more ability to tell the stakeholders what we're doing. I'm going to kind of skip the calendar. I'll just put it up there. You know, we have the state budget being enacted probably at the beginning of July. Then we have the final allocations. We don't expect any changes. There's a final data and accountability meeting. More importantly, your expenditure reports are due at the end of July. Then in August, very critical, we have the TOPS Pro student data due that first week, August 1st. On the state level side, we have a report due to the legislature on all those policy changes. And then the second week, we have the annual plan due. And then hopefully by the end of the month, we release the 17-18 fund. I'm going to skip ahead. You can look at this later. But questions, we have a few minutes open for questions. And I'm trying to figure out this chat feature, so I might have missed a few questions. I know we had John had some questions on field agreements. I'm not sure what that means, John. So you'll have to email me on that because I'm not too sure about that. But we're waiting. I think we have multiple people typing for questions. Beatrice, I think she got her question answered, I hope. And of course, we answered Lucy's questions. My screen that I maximized to see these questions keeps minimizing. So I'm trying to navigate here. August 15th is the third week of August for the annual plan. Oh, okay. So whatever August 15th is, Janet, that's when it's due. Second week, third week. I know you're trying to give yourself an extra week or however you're seeing it. Yeah, so August 15th, where we have regional webinar training. In what capacity, you mean, I'm not sure, in what capacity page? And then Ryan says, we are actually interested in figuring out how to access funds identified to serve formerly incarcerated population. Do you have contact for that information? No, I do not, unfortunately. We don't, it's not one of the mandated programs, so we're not working with. I would start locally and try to work through that, but we don't have any state connections right now. We are working with the labor agency on a English language navigator program. That's kind of about the extent of it.
Really quickly, actually, Neil,
go ahead, Greg.
The LAO put out a report I think it was earlier this year, maybe at the end of last year, on that outlined a number of different workforce type initiatives, in the state, and there were, there was a table in particular right at the front that identified a number of sources of funding for programs designed to meet the needs of the reentry populations. Oh goodness! If you email the AEBG,
so Greg, maybe
send it. Yeah.
If you could, Ryan, if you could email Greg, maybe he could find that document and send it to you. So really quickly, so Paige was wondering about face-to-face. So starting in September or late August, we will have regional training face-to-face, kind of like we did this last spring, and that'll be on the policy changes and the data reporting. So look for that. That'll probably be released soon. On John's question, I have not heard of what you're talking about because there are regulations, Title V regulations and Ed Code that would prohibit colleges unless there's an agreement similar to K-12 agreements. When you cross district boundaries, colleges have the same requirements, so you would have to work out an agreement to do that. So similar to K-12, colleges have those same agreements that need to be worked out if you are going into another college district, just like if you're going into a K-12 district. And let's see. And the manual I'm working on, John. I have I've actually gone through the old Adult Ed handbook from 2005, and I've combined it with the legislation of AB 104. I just need to make it presentable. We did, earth-shattering news. We are coming out in this manual, and I guess we'll do a Q&A soon enough, that CDE and the Chancellor's Office have agreed that AEBG funding will only be used on students 18 years and older. So if you have an emancipated youth, pregnant parenting teen, local board approved, student that's under 18, concurrence, whatever, if you're under 18, you can't use AEBG funds. So John, those are kind of things we'll be updating in the new manual. I'll be working with SCOE on that. We'll be posting that to the website. I just need to stop doing these webinars, right? They can have more time to update the manual. So Paige, I don't know if Chico or Redding is on the schedule. You might have to come down and visit family here in Sacramento. I don't know. We'll see. I don't think we're going to have as many regional events because now we have SCOE to do kind of online type stuff we'll see how that works. So we're a little over time. I appreciate it. Greg, any last comments?
No, not at all. And, thank you. And please do reach out if you have any questions. And yeah, we'll be glad to help.
Okay. And Kelly, that PowerPoint is available right now. If you look on your screen, Veronica loaded that PowerPoint. And Veronica, if you could show Kelly where she should go to find that would be great. And I think the governor did sign the budget. They just have to work out some of the details. So we'll keep you posted and look for more information soon and webinars coming up. And we thank AEBG Technical Assistance Provider, AEBG TAP, for their assistance today. And we look forward to more webinars in the future. And thank you, Greg, for all the help today. And look forward to seeing your annual plans in the future. All right. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.